The church was silent except for the sound of my own breathing. I could feel the cold stone floor pressing against my back, my hands clutching my chest as though I was fighting for my life. My veil spilled around me in a white cloud, and somewhere above me, gasps and frantic whispers rippled through the crowd. I turned my head slightly, my vision blurred just enough to see Ethan, my groom, standing at the altar in his perfectly tailored navy suit, but he wasn't coming toward me. He wasn't even looking at me. His eyes were locked on someone else. Sabrina. She was sitting in the front row, blonde hair pulled back in a sleek bun, lips curved in the faintest smile. Ethan stepped down from the altar, bypassing the officiant, the bridesmaids, the guests reaching out to him. He walked straight to her, bent close, and I heard him say with a half laugh, "Thank God I don't have to go through with this." The words sliced through me sharper than any blade. In that moment, the hum of voices around us faded. My mother's shocked cry barely registered. My brother Jacob shouting, "What the hell, Ethan?" felt distant, like it was happening in another room. Then the paramedics were there, kneeling beside me. One of them, Mark, leaned in, his face shadowed from the bright light streaming through the stained glass windows. His voice was low enough for only me to hear. "Your husband?" he asked. I turned my head slightly, my lips forming the answer I'd been holding back all along. Ex-husband. The word was calm, deliberate, final. Around us, chaos swirled, guests moving to get a better look, photographers snapping pictures, Sabrina touching Ethan's arm like they were sharing some private victory. But none of them knew the truth. Not one person in that church understood that my heart attack wasn't real, that this was my stage, my plan, my trap, and it had just sprung shut. What they didn't know was that every camera in the room was still rolling. And the best part? The real show was only beginning. My name is Claire Henson. I'm 28 years old, a wedding planner from a small town in North Carolina. For most of my life, I believed in perfect love stories. It's not hard to believe in them when you spend your days surrounded by flowers, music, and couples holding hands, promising forever. I grew up with my mother, Marilyn, and my younger brother, Jacob. My father passed away when I was 12. And from that moment, my mother became the strongest person I knew. She worked double shifts as a nurse, never complained, and still found time to cheer at every one of Jacob's soccer games and help me make cupcakes for the school bake sale. She taught me what loyalty looked like, and I carried that into every relationship I had. Jacob was always the protective type, even though he's 3 years younger than me. He's in his final year of engineering school now, still calling me every week to tell me about projects he's working on, still telling me to stay away from guys who think they're God's gift. He didn't like Ethan from the start. I met Ethan Cole 2 years ago at a charity gala I was coordinating. He walked in wearing a charcoal suit and a smile that made people turn their heads. I remember he bid an outrageous amount at the silent auction, then found me afterward to joke about how he just had to impress the prettiest woman in the room. He was smooth, confident, and attentive in a way that made me feel like the only person who mattered. Our romance was fast, weekend getaways to Charleston, candlelit dinners at rooftop restaurants, surprise bouquets delivered to my office with handwritten notes. He said all the right things about wanting a family, about how much he respected my independence, about how lucky he was to have me. It was the kind of whirlwind courtship you see in romantic movies, the kind that makes you ignore the tiny warning bells in your head. Ethan came from money, old money. His family owned property across 3 states, and his mother chaired more charity boards than I could count. They welcomed me politely, but there was a coldness under their smiles. His sister Lydia never missed a chance to make small remarks about my background. "You must be so excited to finally see Europe one day," she'd say, as if I had never traveled before. Or, "I'm sure your family is thrilled you'll be moving up in the world." And then there was Sabrina Hale. She was Ethan's ex-girlfriend, the kind of woman who made every head turn when she walked into a room. Tall, perfectly dressed, with a laugh that sounded like it belonged in a champagne commercial. Ethan told me they'd dated briefly years ago and stayed friends. I wanted to believe that, but Sabrina was always there. At his mother's birthday dinner, at business parties, sitting next to him at charity events because she came alone. I tried to be gracious. I smiled when we were introduced, asked her polite questions, and told myself it was my own insecurity making me notice how her hand lingered on Ethan's arm when she laughed. He insisted they were just friends. The months leading up to the wedding were hectic, but I made sure every detail was perfect. I designed the floral arrangements myself, worked with the caterer to customize the menu, and picked a string quartet I'd been saving for years to book. If I was going to marry Ethan, it was going to be the most beautiful day of our lives. But the night before the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, I saw something I couldn't shake. Ethan and Sabrina stood together near the back of the room, their heads close. I was halfway across the hall, but I could see the way his lips curved into that familiar smile, the one I used to think was just for me. She said something that made him laugh quietly, and then she touched his tie, straightening it like it was the most natural thing in the world. When they noticed me watching, Ethan waved me over, introducing me to a group of his business friends, but Sabrina's smirk stayed with me long after she walked away. Later that night, in the quiet of my hotel room, I replayed it over and over, and then I remembered a text I'd glimpsed a week earlier when Ethan left his phone face up on the counter. I hadn't meant to snoop, but the preview was right there. I can't wait for this to be over. The sender's name was Sabrina. I told myself there had to be another meaning. Maybe it was about a project or an event. But deep down, something in my gut told me I was walking into a trap. That's when my mother's voice came back to me from a conversation we'd had just a few days before. Claire, a man's character is like the foundation of a house. If it's cracked before you build, it won't stand for long. Still, I smiled for the cameras on the morning of the wedding. I let the makeup artist fuss over my eyeliner and the photographer pose me by the window for bridal portraits. I kept telling myself it was nerves, that tomorrow I'd wake up as Mrs. Ethan Cole and all my doubts would fade. But a voice deep inside me whispered that this was not a love story. And as much as I wanted to believe otherwise, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. The morning of the wedding should have been a blur of excitement, bridesmaids giggling in silk robes, champagne glasses clinking, my mother's teary smile as she fastened the clasp of my necklace. Instead, the day felt heavy, like there was something waiting just around the corner. I kept telling myself I was overthinking, but the unease sat deep in my chest. The first real crack in the day came when I stepped out into the hallway of the church to find Ethan. I was looking for a quiet moment before the ceremony, maybe just to reassure myself that we were okay. That's when I heard voices drifting from the groomsmen's room. Trevor Miles, one of Ethan's closest friends, was speaking low but clear enough for me to hear. "Man, after today, you're free. No more pretending." I froze. Ethan's voice followed, quieter, almost amused. "Yeah, just a few more hours." I didn't wait to hear more. My stomach twisted so hard it felt like I might be sick. I stepped back into the hallway and leaned against the wall, trying to breathe. Pretending? Free? Was I the prison he was about to escape from? When I walked back into the bridal suite, my maid of honor, Natalie Green, noticed something in my face. Natalie had been my best friend since high school. She knew me better than anyone. "Claire, what happened? You look pale," she whispered, adjusting my veil. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just nerves." But as I looked at myself in the mirror, my reflection didn't look nervous. It looked like someone who already knew the truth, but didn't want to say it out loud. Minutes before the ceremony began, I peeked out from the side of the chapel, watching guests take their seats. I spotted Sabrina instantly, front row, directly in Ethan's line of sight. She was wearing a sleek emerald dress that made her stand out against the softer colors of the other guests. Her legs were crossed, her posture perfect, her eyes scanning the room like she owned it. And then I saw Ethan. He wasn't looking at the officiant or greeting his family or even scanning the crowd. His gaze was fixed on her. As the string quartet began to play softly, Sabrina smirked. It was small, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. The kind of smirk that says, "I know something you don't." She gave the tiniest shake of her head, like this whole event was a joke. I pulled back from the curtain, my heart hammering. I thought about all the times I had caught them in quiet corners at events, talking in low voices, the way Ethan's phone always seemed to light up with her name late at night when he thought I was asleep. The time I asked about her and he rolled his eyes saying, "Claire, you're being dramatic." This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was confirmation. I sat down in a side pew for a moment, pressing my hands together to steady them. My mother's voice echoed in my head again, warning me not to ignore what was right in front of me. That's when it hit me. If I walked down that aisle today, I'd be locking myself into a life with a man who didn't truly love me. Maybe never had. I'd be smiling for photos, signing papers, hosting dinner parties, while knowing that in his heart, there was always someone else. I felt a slow, simmering anger rising up, replacing the ache in my chest. But it wasn't the kind of anger that makes you cry. It was the kind that makes you sharp, focused. I didn't just want to walk away. I wanted him to show everyone who he really was, not in private, not in whispered arguments months later, but right here, in front of everyone he was trying to impress. Natalie came over, touching my arm. "You're thinking about calling it off, aren't you?" I met her eyes. "Not exactly. I'm thinking about proving something." Her brow furrowed. "Proving what?" "That Ethan Cole is not the man he pretends to be." I leaned in close, lowering my voice. "I need you to do something for me. If anything happens during the ceremony, don't stop filming, no matter what." Natalie hesitated for only a second before nodding. "You got it." The idea was forming so fast it almost felt like instinct. I remembered my cousin, a paramedic, once showing me how to mimic the symptoms of a heart attack, how to clutch your chest, control your breathing, even make your pulse read irregular on a portable monitor. It had been a strange party trick back then, but now it felt like a weapon. I knew how Ethan worked. If I suddenly collapsed, he'd have a choice: rush to me in front of everyone, or let his real priorities show. And if he chose wrong, the cameras would capture it forever. As the wedding coordinator gave the cue for the bridesmaids to line up, I felt my heart pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. This was it. The moment before the truth came crashing into the open. The music shifted to the bridal march. My mother gave my hand a gentle squeeze before stepping aside. The double doors swung open, the light pouring in from the stained glass windows. I took my first step down the aisle, the hem of my dress gliding over the white runner. I glanced at Ethan. His expression was calm, but his eyes flicked once, just once, to Sabrina. My suspicion hardened into certainty. Halfway to the altar, I knew exactly how this day was going to end. By the time I reached the altar, my mind was no longer on vows or rings. Every movement, every breath was part of a larger plan forming in my head. Ethan stepped forward to take my hand. His palm was warm, steady, as if nothing in the world was wrong. But I saw it, the brief flick of his eyes toward Sabrina before he smiled at me. That smile no longer looked charming. It looked like a mask. The officiant began his welcome, but my thoughts were somewhere else. I remembered the small, portable blood pressure cuff and pulse oximeter tucked away in my bouquet. They were there because I had planned to check my vitals before the ceremony. I'd been anxious all morning and wanted to make sure my heart wasn't actually in trouble. But now they had a different purpose. If I was going to do this, I needed the right moment. The first half of the ceremony passed in a haze. My bridesmaids stood to my left, their dresses catching the light. Guests shifted in their seats. I caught glimpses of my mother, her expression soft and full of hope. I felt a pang of guilt, but I reminded myself that this wasn't about embarrassing my family. It was about exposing Ethan before I made the biggest mistake of my life. When the officiant asked us to exchange vows, Ethan went first. His words were rehearsed, polished, delivered with that same even tone he used in business meetings. "You make me a better man," he said, looking into my eyes. But I could see the lie behind it. I'd seen the way he looked at Sabrina, the smirk they shared. Then it was my turn. My voice was steady, but I kept it brief, shorter than I'd rehearsed. As soon as I finished, I let my breath hitch just slightly, enough for the nearest guests to notice. The officiant turned to the best man for the rings. That was my moment. I took a sharp, loud breath, then my hand went to my chest, my knees buckled, and I let the weight of my dress pull me forward. The bouquet slipped from my fingers, the devices hidden inside tumbling with it. Gasps echoed through the church as I fell to the floor. Someone screamed my name. I heard chairs scraping. From the corner of my eye, I could see Ethan. He didn't move toward me. He didn't kneel or call my name. Instead, his head whipped toward the front row, toward Sabrina. In 3 long strides, he was at her side. "Thank God," I heard him say, voice low but not low enough. "I don't have to go through with this." Every sound in the room seemed to sharpen. My mother's horrified gasp. My brother Jacob shouting, "What the hell, Ethan?" Natalie's camera clicking rapidly from somewhere behind me. I kept my breathing shallow, my body limp. I felt hands on my arm. Mark Daniels, the paramedic I'd arranged to be on call through Natalie's contact list, was kneeling beside me. His expression was calm, professional, but his voice was pitched low enough so only I could hear. "Your husband?" he asked. "Ex-husband," I replied without hesitation. Mark gave the smallest nod, understanding exactly what I meant. He reached for my wrist, checking my pulse in a way that would look convincing to the guests, while buying time for Natalie to capture more footage. Around us, the room buzzed with shock. People were turning in their seats, trying to see past one another. Some were whispering. Others were openly staring at Ethan, who still hadn't moved toward me. He was standing close to Sabrina, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Natalie caught my eye from the other side of the aisle. She had her phone raised, filming. Her expression was a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. Mark leaned in again. "You want me to bring you up now or let it run a bit longer?" "Longer," I whispered. He gave a subtle shrug and began speaking loudly enough for the guests to hear. "Her pulse is unstable. We need space here." People shuffled back, giving him room. I could hear the shuffling of feet, the low hum of shocked conversation. Jacob's voice cut through it all. "You ran to her? My sister's lying on the ground and you ran to her?" That was when Ethan's mask cracked. "It's not what it looks like," he snapped, his voice edged with frustration. "I was just—" Sabrina interrupted, her tone cool and dismissive. "Ethan, you don't need to explain yourself to them." I had enough. My plan wasn't to humiliate him in some drawn-out scandal. My plan was to show the truth, as plainly as possible, in front of the people who mattered most to him. And I had it now, his words, his actions caught from every angle by Natalie's cameras. I placed my palm on the floor and pushed myself up slowly, feigning weakness. The room gasped again. Mark reached to steady me, but I waved him off. My mother rushed forward, tears brimming in her eyes, but I gave her a reassuring glance. "Ethan," I said, my voice carrying through the quiet space, "we need to talk. Outside. With everyone watching." His jaw tightened. "Claire, you're not well. This isn't—" I cut him off. "It's exactly what it looks like, and they deserve to see it." Natalie, already moving, wheeled out a small portable projector she'd set up in the reception hall earlier. She positioned it so the white wall of the church could serve as a screen. With a few quick taps, she began playing back the footage. There it was, me collapsing. Ethan's reaction, his words to Sabrina. The way he didn't look back, not once as I lay on the floor. Gasps rippled through the guests again. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." I stood there, my chest rising and falling, watching as Ethan's carefully constructed image shattered in front of the very people he'd been trying to impress. The ceremony was over, and so was the marriage that never began. The room was so silent you could hear the faint hum of the projector. Every pair of eyes was glued to the white wall at the front of the church. On it, the footage played in crisp, unforgiving clarity. First, the image of me walking down the aisle, my dress flowing across the runner. Then, the moment I clutched my chest, staggered, and fell. Gasps filled the room again as people relived it from another angle. And then came the part that mattered most. Ethan stepping down from the altar, not toward me, but directly to Sabrina. His voice crystal clear from the hidden microphone Natalie had placed earlier. "Thank God, I don't have to go through with this." It was all there, his tone, the slight upward curl of his lips, the relief in his posture, and then Sabrina's hand sliding onto his arm like she had been waiting for that exact moment. From the corner of the room, I heard someone whisper, "My God." My mother was standing beside me now, her arms folded tightly across her chest, her jaw set in a way I'd only seen when she was truly furious. Jacob had moved to block Ethan's path, standing like a guard in front of me. Ethan tried to speak over the video. "This is being taken out of context." The projection showed him laughing quietly with Sabrina, her lips close to his ear. "Out of context?" Jacob's voice was sharp. "What's the right context for abandoning your fiancé in the middle of the ceremony to run to your ex?" Several guests murmured in agreement. Others simply shook their heads. The footage ended with Mark kneeling beside me, asking, "Your husband?" And my reply, "Ex-husband." The video froze on Ethan's stunned expression as the room lights returned. Natalie turned the projector off but kept her camera aimed at him, capturing every second of what came next. I stepped forward, my dress whispering against the floor. My legs felt steady now. My voice carried across the room. "Ethan, I spent months planning a life with you. I defended you when people told me they didn't trust you. I convinced myself that Sabrina was just a friend. And today, when you could have proven them all wrong, you proved them right." He raised his hand slightly, as if to calm me. "Claire, you don't understand. You didn't mean to get caught." I cut in. Sabrina stood too, her chin lifted. "This is humiliating, Claire. For all of us. You should just stop before you make yourself look worse." I turned to her, meeting her gaze. "You're right about one thing. It is humiliating, but not for me." I gestured toward the crowd. "It's humiliating for the man who showed everyone here exactly who he is." The guests shifted uncomfortably. A few women in the front row exchanged glances that told me they'd been in similar situations, maybe not as public, but just as painful. Ethan's mother, seated 2 rows back, pressed her lips together, her face pale. His sister Lydia looked away, her earlier smugness replaced with something like embarrassment. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring. I held it between my fingers for a moment, letting the light catch on the diamond. Then I crossed the space between us and placed it in his palm. "We're done," I said simply. He stared at the ring, his jaw tightening. "You'll regret this." I shook my head. "Number, I'll regret every day I wasted believing you were someone worth marrying." That was when the guests began to applaud. Not loud, but steady, building into a wave of clapping that filled the room. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear, "You just saved yourself a lifetime of misery." Jacob gave my shoulder a squeeze. "Proud of you, sis." Ethan looked around as if expecting someone to defend him. No one did. Even Trevor, his groomsman, avoided his eyes. Sabrina muttered something under her breath and headed for the door, her heels clicking against the floor. Ethan followed, but the applause chased him down the aisle. Natalie lowered her camera, smiling at me. "Every second of that is on record. What do you want me to do with it?" I thought for a moment. Post it. Let the world see exactly how this went down. The next day, the footage went viral. It spread across social media like wildfire, accompanied by headlines about the bride who exposed her groom at the altar. Strangers messaged me to say they wished they'd had the courage to walk away when they saw the warning signs. But standing there in that moment, with the projector still warm and the applause fading, I didn't care about going viral. I cared that I had walked into this church as someone who doubted herself, and I was walking out as someone who didn't. I turned to my mother and Jacob, linked my arms with theirs, and walked down the aisle, not as a bride, but as a woman who had chosen herself over a man who never deserved her. By the time I stepped outside the church, the late afternoon sun was warm on my skin. The breeze carried the faint scent of roses from the floral arrangements that would never be used for the reception. My heels clicked against the stone steps, and for the first time all day, I felt light. Natalie followed close behind, her camera still slung over her shoulder. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Better than I've been in months." My mother wrapped her arm around me, guiding me toward her car. Jacob walked on my other side like a silent guard, his eyes scanning the parking lot as if Ethan might try one last time to talk to me. He didn't. The last I saw of him, he was pacing near the back of the church with his hands on his head, Sabrina standing a few feet away with her arms crossed. The drive back to my apartment was calm. My mother kept her hand on mine the whole way. "You know," she said softly, "your father would have been proud of you today. He always wanted you to trust your instincts." That hit me in a way I hadn't expected. For so long, I'd thought trusting someone meant giving them the benefit of the doubt, but now I understood. It also meant trusting myself enough to walk away when I saw the truth. By that evening, the video was everywhere. Natalie had posted it to her social media with a short caption, "When the groom shows his true colors at the altar." It spread faster than we imagined, shared by friends, then strangers, then picked up by larger accounts. Comments poured in from people around the world. Some were shocked. "I can't believe he did that in front of everyone." Others were supportive. "Good for you, girl. You dodged a bullet." And some shared their own stories of betrayal. "I wish I had done what you did instead of ignoring the signs." For a few days, my phone didn't stop buzzing. News outlets wanted interviews. Wedding blogs wanted to feature the story. I turned most of them down. This wasn't about becoming a viral sensation. It was about reclaiming my life. Ethan tried to call me twice. I didn't answer. He sent a single text, "You've ruined my reputation." I deleted it without replying. His reputation wasn't my responsibility. His actions were. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing. I threw myself into work, but I approached it differently now. As a wedding planner, I'd always focused on aesthetics. Perfect flowers, perfect music, perfect lighting. Now I began offering something new to my clients. Guidance on protecting themselves emotionally and financially before they walked down the aisle. I called it the safety checklist. It wasn't just about prenups or contracts. It was about having the hard conversations, spotting red flags, and making sure they were marrying for the right reasons. Word spread quickly. Soon I had more clients than I could take. Women told me they felt safer knowing someone had their back, not just for the wedding, but for the marriage ahead. At home, I made changes too. I got rid of the gifts Ethan and I had received during our engagement, donating them to a local shelter. I redecorated my apartment, choosing warm colors and soft textures that made the space feel like mine again. One night, about a month later, Jacob came over with takeout. As we sat on the couch eating lo mein from paper boxes, he grinned at me. "You know, you're kind of a legend now. My friends can't stop talking about you." I laughed. "A legend for faking a heart attack?" "A legend for refusing to marry a jerk," he corrected. My mother joined us a few minutes later, bringing homemade pie. We sat together, laughing and talking late into the night. I realized I didn't feel lonely anymore. I didn't feel like I'd lost anything. I felt like I'd gained a freedom I didn't even know I needed. A few weeks after that, I received an email from a woman named Claire, another Claire, from across the country. She wrote, "I saw your video. I was supposed to get married in October, but my fiancé has been making me feel uneasy. I confronted him, and it turns out he was cheating. I left. You gave me the courage to walk away before I made the biggest mistake of my life. I read that message 3 times. It was the moment I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was helping other people make their own escapes. That made every second of that day worth it." The last time I heard about Ethan was from a mutual acquaintance who mentioned his business had lost several clients. Sabrina had moved to another city. It didn't matter to me anymore. They were no longer part of my story. On the anniversary of what was supposed to be my wedding day, I booked a solo trip to Italy. I walked through the cobblestone streets of Florence, ate gelato on the steps of ancient piazzas, and stood on the cliffs of the Amalfi Coast watching the waves crash below. I thought about the girl who almost married a man who didn't love her, and how she'd become the woman standing there, sun on her face, smiling without a single doubt in her mind. Sometimes the biggest heartbreaks are the best things that can happen to you. Walking down that aisle toward Ethan would have been the start of a life built on lies. Walking away was the start of a life built on truth. I didn't need a husband to feel complete. I needed to trust myself. And that's exactly what I do now, every single day. And that's how I walked away from the wedding that could have ruined my life. What was supposed to be the start of forever turned into the moment I chose myself over someone who didn't deserve me. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Trust your instincts, even when it's hard. The truth always comes out, and you are always worth choosing. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life twists like this, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss what's coming next. Your support means the world to me, and every like, comment, and share helps keep these stories going.